It said it could give her power and other things as well. She claimed that she flew to the next town over and came back that night. I don't know, this is what she said. At this point I am gripped with fear. I have no clue what's going on. I know we are not going back that place until things could be resolved. She seemed fine and we take her to work. She said she kept slamming her hands in drawers at work and didn't know why. We then stopped by the apartment to pick some clothes up for her. When we walked through the door to my GF's apartment, the smell was horrible. It smelled like rotting meat. It didn't smell like that when we left. Also she's big on keeping the place clean. The smell was everywhere and every room had no distinct source. Me and her friend quickly gather some of my GF's clothes then leave. My friend comes over later that day. At this point we realized that we may very well be dealing with a demon. My GF then texts me and says that she still needs to go to the apartment and get some stuff we forgot. It's daytime and I got my friend with me, so we met her there and we all go in. At this point she's acting strange again. She starts to aimlessly rummage through the house looking for nothing. She's swearing as she does so. My friend discreetly pulls out his camera on his phone and starts to record her strange behavior. She immediately notices and demanded that he stopped. She then walks to the bathroom. Me and my friend tail behind her, not letting her out of our sight. She runs into the dark bathroom and closes the door. I immediately open it. The lights are still off in the bathroom. I turn them on. I say, "What are you doing?" She says, "Using the bathroom." I say, "With lights off?" She say, "Yeah." Then I say, "Hey, I can't let you be in there in the dark with the door closed, because of everything that's going on." She makes a good point and says she's not going with door open because my friend is there. He says to her he will walk away, it's no big deal. No go, I say, "At least turn the light on," and she does, and closes the door. Now the thing with the bathroom door is that it's slotted. You can see into the bathroom if you look between the slots. This is what I saw. Look into bathroom through the slots in the door. CGF. She's standing on top of the toilet. Reaches into the medicine cabinet for a pill bottle. I have my hand on the doorknob at the ready. I say, "Hey, what are you doing?" Thinking she's gonna try to OD on something. Gets down off the toilet. Bends down at the door. Looks through the exact same slot as me. Instinctively knew which slot to look through. Her eyes meet mine. Says it's not nice to. We're leaving. Drag her out the bathroom. She stops in her room, waste more time. Is shoved to the floor by an invisible force. Make haste and leave. As we are leaving, she's acting very weird. She said she saw herself standing in the window when we were leaving and outside. But she's really standing next to me. Then switches back to the "I don't wanna be touched" bit. At this point I'm certain it's a demonic entity. I grab her by the hand. She tries to escape my grasp but I hold on tight. Look at her. The demon now. Say it was a bad idea to occupy this body. You can now be contained. Looks at me, says, "I'd like to see you try." I say, "We'll just have to see." As we were driving back to her friend's house, I was in the back seat and she was sitting in the front, and without her noticing I took a small cross that I had and pressed it against her neck. She immediately tensed up, then looked behind her at me and gave me this look of, "I'm going to kill you for that." We make it back to her friend's house and she's normalish now. Knows what's going on in the situation. See, it was weird because 1 second she would be fine, then I guess this thing would attempt to take her over again, and it took all her will to fight it off. She would become immobile, her eyes would get very pale, and she wasn't able to speak. It got worse at night, and by that I mean it was too strong. During the daytime I found that if I carry her out of the house and put her in direct sunlight, the effects would start to cease. Only problem is there is only so much daylight. One particular instance I kept saying her name and that she needed to keep fighting. She looked up at me and said, "That's not my name." And then 5 minutes later whatever it was gave up. Until the next attack. And it would inevitably win. but from my understanding it seemed that it didn't have total control yet. In between these periods she would be pushed to the ground by an invisible force. And I couldn't help but notice the amount of strange-looking insects that started to gather inside any room she was in. After she would come out of these states, she would be very tired and weak. After a particularly nasty episode that lasted for an hour, she began to tell me things I would never tell anyone, and for good reason. And the way how she explained it was as if she was there experiencing it. You see, for a long time from 1524, I wasn't in the best mental health. I had really bad depression that would explode into psychotic rage. I was in and out of mental institutions constantly. I would either violently attempt suicide, or I would just go crazy and start destroying anyone next to me. Worst part is I could see myself act like this. But I felt like something else was making me do it. I'd do a bit in the mental institution which would only be a couple of days, and then get released because I exhibited no signs of continued negative symptoms. Then it becomes even darker. When I was 22, I took to killing small animals in the woods. I developed a lust for violence. Something inside me just wanted me to do it. In a way, I felt like I was being coached. After every time I killed something, I'd just hear a little voice in the back of my head saying this was all just training for people. At that same time I felt horrible for what I was doing and knew that this what a coward does. And that doing this to people would make me feel even worse. And how I will regret this for the rest of my life. I'm still horrified, dishonored by those actions. I love animals, especially small ones. I felt so sick for hurting them, and even worse for them because of the amount of suffering I put them through. My life shortly afterwards crumbled in front of me, and I succumbed to alcoholism and became completely worthless. I sought to correct that, and to make up for what I've done, I had no choice. I was looking at prison time for unrelated events. Even so, it feels like no matter what I do, I can't make it up. And it's probably because you can't. She explained to me that she knew that too. That the spots where they were killed, I killed them, a darkness emanates up from the ground. And that it was with me at the time. The demon. It knew me my entire life. Would visit me in my dreams disguised as a child. Asked me what my fears were. I'd gladly tell because I was a kid. It would influence me to do things mentioned previously and other things. She told me it said that I had a lot of evil inside me. That it was very fond of me. That it had lost me. I moved away for a year. And now it found me again. We need to go back to her place soon. Her body can't stay separated from her soul for too long, it will eventually take full control. It was a lot to take in. The parts about me left me feeling like my entire life was just a game to something. And I never had a clue. And the parts about going back to the apartment were just as uneasy feeling as well. I thought if we went there alone, that thing would take control, and then I don't know what the fuck would happen. But it would most likely be bad. I tell her we need to just chill for a second and come up with a plan. So we do for an hour. She sketches a simple drawing of the demon. Long shredded black robe from head to toe. No feet though or toes. Black smoke coming out of the bottom of the robe. Hovered a bit off the ground. Long arms with long pale fingers and claws for fingernails. It wore a mask that looked similar to the mask in my original post at the top. Great game seemed kinda cheesy. It wearing a mask and all. If it actually had a function I have no clue. It could extend and retract its limbs. Can change shapes and size. Can look like other people. So after all this, I'm like, let's come up with a plan. She said she already had one. She said in her house she has some sage, real sage, not the cooking shit, and rosemary. I immediately saw what she was getting at. Some type of purification ritual. I had heard of it, didn't know if it worked, but when you were desperate. She had previously told me she used to practice magic and shit and that she was good at it. But stopped because she didn't like what she was doing to people. So before we leave to attempt this god-awful plan, in the other room, Say that I'm sorry for the things I've done and that from here on out I'll let you take control of my life and I'll adhere to your commands. Became a Christian alright, and no, we're not gonna start preaching in this thread either. It's something I'd swear I'd never do. I hated Christians. I didn't speak to my brothers a lot because they made me sick. I despised them, all Christians. But after that short emotional prayer, I felt what was like a flame become ignited in my chest. Everything became very vivid and sharp. My weary demeanor from not sleeping for 3 nights wore off, and fear was replaced with serenity. We then settled up and headed out the door. She said we had to do it before nightfall. The walk felt like the longest walk of my life. We both walked together and then made it to the house. She told me I couldn't go in with her. As we opened the door I felt a presence at the door. It was different, not malicious but warm. I looked at her and said, "That's you, isn't it?" And she said yes. She steps inside, turns around to face me, and says no matter what I hear, I can't come in and just stay put. So I do. 10 minutes go by and I hear banging and screaming inside the apartment. Then the bathroom window slides open. White smoke is billowing out of it. And then she appears in the window. Looks completely normal. Eye color is correct. Facial expressions are correct. Seems totally normal again. Says she got to burn the stuff in every room and open all the windows. So she doesn't as she's going from room to room. I'm following her along on the outside until all the rooms had been cleansed. She then comes to the door and tells me it's okay to come in now. I step inside, the entire place is filled with smoke. I look at her and say, "Did you get the basement?" And she said no. But she feels normal again. I say I'll get the basement but come with me. So I take a dish and load it up with sage and rosemary. And we head down to the basement. I feel it down there. We head to the little windowless root cellar where no light touches. I open the double doors and place the incense in there and ignite it. As I was doing this I got the mental picture that it was cowering in that room. After I lit the incense I loudly recite word for word the Lord's Prayer, the long version. I had never spoken it before but all of the words came to me. After the prayer I slammed the double door shut. We walked back upstairs and I mentally revoked the permission I gave it to come upstairs. After that everything was quiet. And the house felt normal again. Then later that night my friend calls me panicked, saying that thing was after him now and that he could hear it in his head. He's never called me panicking or ever claimed to hear voices. He's a very thorough scientific person. Then I hear a loud voice in my head saying he has to delete the data he collected. You see, the whole time these events transpired I knew that he was secretly recording everything. I told him to erase the data and it'll make it go away. He does. I call him the next day and everything's all quiet. I was scarred by the entire event. For 2 months I slept with the lights on. For 2 months, I jumped at any sound. For 2 months I was paranoid out of my mind. But I eventually recovered and got my mental bearing back. 4 months passed after the event. And then negative vibes began again around the house. You see, the problem is that we were only able to cleanse the first floor of this place and there was still an upstairs, which we couldn't get to because people live there, and how we're gonna explain to them that shit, so it never really left. I worked midnights sometimes and my GF would text me that she heard screaming in the living room, or just really loud stomping in the kitchen. We decided that we just had to move. After we found a place we started to pack immediately, and as we were packing, we started to get the feeling that we really didn't want to move. Even though we both know that the house is